Shubi Private School is one of the best schools in his area, but Hajime Takashi came here only because his favorite manga called Love Mav took place here. He came 2 hours before the entrance ceremony, taking pictures of everything around the school like a tourist, including old men. What, you think I wouldn't notice that, Hajime? He wanted to check out the resource room on the first floor, because it's where Aoi used to be most of the time in the manga. He rushes in, thinking he's alone, only to find a girl sitting in the room. They both dramatically stare at each other. Hajime thinks it's actually her. He apologizes for busting into the room. Hajime asks what she's doing. She has some time before the entrance ceremony, so she got permission to use the resource room to learn about the school's details. She's a new student that looks just like him. She asks who Aoi is, and he explains about the manga. Before he finishes his sentence, he notices her facial expression. She waited for him to finish his sentence. It turns out he commonly gets this face. He apologizes and runs out of the room in embarrassment. He planned to hide his otaku side in high school, but when he saw the girl looked just like his favorite character, his tongue slipped, and so did the snake in his pants. Luckily for him, the school is massive, so there's a chance he can go the next 3 years without seeing her again. Sadly for him, they're in the same class, and he got put right next to each other in the seating plan. It seems luck is not on his side today. He fears that his otaku secret will be spread around the school. He hopes that there's a small chance she forgot about him and bends down to look at her face, only to find her eyes gazing into his soul. She hits the four-legged sprint out of the classroom while he's trembling in fear. He has a feeling he's going to be used as a source of entertainment and has no way to pay her. A girl rises from her seat, flabbergasted that Kuro said something other than a simple yes or no. If they're all releasing some suspicious liquids at just the sound of her voice, how will they react if she makes eye contact with them? One of the girls is mad at him for addressing her wrong. Yayoi Kurokawa comes from an ultra-rich family. She's amazing academically and in sports, and many people came to this school just to follow her. They're all jealous of him for sitting directly next to her, so they all already despise him. Now his reputation is off to a bad start, and now he's the second center of attention in the classroom. He can't go anywhere without getting the death stare from other people. He gets pulled by someone. He looks to his right, and it's Kuro, and yoinks him into the classroom. He couldn't resist her pressure, and now is probably going to be humiliated by her. She isn't doing anything at the moment, but looks like she's struggling to speak. She asks to see the manga that he was yapping about earlier. She was interested in what he was talking about. Her eyes weren't full of disdain. She just locked in. They're both socially awkward. He doesn't have it on him right now. Kuro is disappointed and accuses him of not loving manga. I know, right? How could she? He tried to clear up the misunderstanding. He tells her it's against the school rules. She struggles to get the words out of her mouth. Hajime asks if she likes manga. She's never read it before. She vents to him and explains that she has appealed to her parents' high expectations alongside everyone else's expectations too. So she always holds back and tries her best. She really wants to do what she likes. So when she saw him talking about his hobby earlier, it made her really want to read the same thing without feeling guilty about it. Her mood changes instantly and thanked him for listening to her story. She apologizes for stopping him and requests that he keep it between the two of them. Before he left the classroom, he asks if she wants to enjoy manga secretly. He says if she doesn't mind, she can read manga on his phone, just for while they're at school. She jumps up in excitement. She asks what it is. He explains how to use the app. Kuro stares at it in amazement, and she gets really excited. Aoi realizes she just let her true self show in front of him and tries to act more composed. She asks if it's weird. He thinks it isn't weird at all. He recalls when he bought his first manga. He felt the exact same way. He said that otakus are happy creatures when they find friends. Her heart skipped a beat and tells her not to worry about it. He tells her he'll keep her secret and leaves the room. He thought that his approach might have been a bit too forceful. He didn't want to be a big bother to her. He recognizes this place in the manga where Aoi stopped the protagonist and says to himself that it's not like it's going to happen in real life, thanks to the writer's plot armor. Kuro appeared behind him. She's always been alone, so being able to talk to him so casually made her really happy. He's wrong about this being a coincidence, and glad she enrolled into this high school. For the first time, they both have someone that shares the same hobby. She asks to be his friend, but he's just a gross otaku. He tells her he'll look forward to being friends with her. Kuro calls and asks him if he has a moment. Everyone's attention was directed at them. Most thought she was going to scold him. They went behind the school. She noticed that their school is the model for the manga she's reading. She loved the manga corporations. Originally, you had to pay to read the second chapter of Love Mav because of partnering with other companies because of clever. What on earth is she saying? She asks when I will appear in the manga. It's the nickname of the hero Ai Akasaka. She probably thinks that Ai is some kind of creature mascot, and asks her if she thinks the main character resembles her a little. She thinks he's lying, since she believes believes she isn't cute at all. It seems like she has no awareness of how people look at her in public and thinks Ai is way more charming than she is. She tells him if he says another weird joke like that, she'll get mad. He says he's just glad that she's getting into his favorite manga. He looks over to the tree in the distance. He recognizes where this is in the manga. He wants to talk to her about it, but doesn't want to spoil it for her. But coincidentally, the same thing happens to him. I swear this character has some Hakari luck. He has the cliché nosebleed and apologizes since he's a bit overwhelmed with emotions while he's cleaning up. He tells her to let him know about what she thinks about Chapter 2. 6 days later, she built up 80 points so that she can finally read Chapter 2. She screams really loudly. Escanor's grandpa rushes into her room to see what's wrong. She makes the excuse that she was just sleep-talking. He apologizes for disturbing her and leaves the room. She's left on a cliffhanger. The next day, Hajime is walking through the hallways and gets pulled by Kuro. Again, she asks for a moment with her. She confirms with him that he's purchased all of the chapters of Love Mav and asks that after Chapter 2, are there any lewd scenes? Hajime is confused since he doesn't recall it having any and shows him the proof. He just found out that she has no tolerance for mildly erotic content. She showed him the swimsuit, and he tries to convince her that it's wholesome on every page. He didn't expect her to have such a strong reaction to this. Hajime needs to convince her that it's not erotic manga, so she'll keep reading. She asks him what he'd think if she did the same thing. Because of all those days on the hub, he starts imagining it. She dismisses it real quick and tells him she wasn't expecting such a shameless scene, and when she saw it, she made a really weird noise. He didn't want her to stop reading the manga. She talks about those fashion magazines that show a little cleavage, but even those are targeted at women, and mainly men read this manga. She refuses to look at them because they're too naughty. As she keeps speaking, he starts to think that changing her mind will be impossible. He tries to get his confidence back and think of something. Hajime asks her if he's also a wimp who watches hentai. He makes the example that when he changes clothes, he definitely takes his clothes off. So does it make him lewd as well? She's losing her marbles. He shows her the scene of Ai changing to prove she isn't a character who enjoys showing her cleavage to men, and twists this on her by saying she's the dirty-minded one for thinking it's lewd. Somehow he convinced her it's nothing weird and changed her perception on things. The bell rings, and they hurry to their classes. Kuro's phone slips out of her hand. A teacher picks it up and notices the questionable drawing and asks Ai if it's her phone. Hajime steps in for Kuro and tells the teacher that she scolded him for walking and looking at his phone. The teacher tells him she understands that he's at that age, but not to go around showing girls these naughty things. And then the realization kicks in. Kuro pulls him back into the classroom, and he apologizes for not realizing it was lewd after all. He explains that he was evaluating it by its cuteness and not its eroticness, and didn't want to betray her expectations. She gets on her knees and says she'll expect that from him then. He gives her phone back and says she's sorry for getting him into trouble. Hajime had no one to talk to about manga until now. There's dead silence, so he thinks he messed up, so he heads to the classroom first, and she starts blushing. He was looking at the club sheet, but wasn't planning on joining any and forgot they even existed. Kuro and Hajime's conversations in the resource room can't really be a club activity, and thought about how lonely he'd be if Kuro joined any clubs. It was a miracle she even wanted to talk to him after school in the first place, and he'll be happy if she joins one. Kuro asks him about the manga research club. He was a little confused, since she did say earlier that she wanted to keep her manga hobby a secret from everyone. He started overthinking the situation, and decided to happily send her off to any club. He hints that the manga research club sounds great, but instead stuttered. He was just a little surprised that she would be interested in that club. He's still trying to mentally process this whole situation, and her blank stare isn't helping. He's finding it difficult to lie to her. He tells her she doesn't want her to join it. He's had so much fun for the past few days. They'll have less time to talk to each other. It's pathetic and selfish of him, but he wanted to be honest with how he felt. She dramatically clings onto the paper. She turns around and tells him not to worry, since she won't join any clubs. He could tell something was wrong with her voice. Kuro asks if he's going to join any, but he decides that he's going home and won't be going to any. Kuro drops to the floor. He asks if she's okay. She asks for a second and explains that she lost her strength because she was so relieved. She's probably making a weird face right now. Now she knows he won't be joining any clubs. She'll just head home for today, since her face isn't going away anytime soon. Hajime says goodbye and wonders what face she was making. After their class ended, Kuro had to tell Hajime her thoughts on the latest chapter she read. One of her classmates asked her if she can help her with today's maths since she didn't understand it. After spending some time explaining it, another little leech asks her for help with English. They all give Hajime as if he shit himself in the middle of the classroom, and eventually she sits there there, helping every leech after she was done with all of them. She checked the time, and it was already past 7 p.m. She rushes to the classroom to find Hajime. She felt guilty. He appears behind her and tells her she did a great job today in the classroom. But then she got really excited that he waited for her. She asked him where he's been. Apparently, he was picking some flowers while he was waiting for her. She was in the middle of explaining until the speakers for the school told all the students to go home since school is about to close. He needed to run for the bus since it's about to leave, so they couldn't talk to each other. She gets picked up by her butler. Midway through the drive, she asks him to drive a little more smoothly. He apologizes, while his eyes are off the road, and they end up in a car accident and get isekai'd. She told him about the situation. She felt bad that she wasted someone else's time and wanted a better way to go about the situation. He asks if it's best to just send an email, but she heard recently that high school students don't really use that anymore. Kuro didn't want to seem like she was out of touch with reality. Trust me, we know. So he recommends an app to her. It's basically WhatsApp, in other words. The next day after school, Hajime notices Kuro disappeared without a word. She stood there like an Elden Ring boss, waiting for you to enter the mist. She was really surprised that this app works on all smartphones. They both didn't know about it. She went back home. He was left there alone in the classroom. But it seems as if that conversation ended off a bit too early. Kuro looked satisfied inside the car. Escanor's little brother asks her if she accomplished her goal. As that sentence began to sink in, she had completely forgotten to ask him for his contact information. He knows that it's rare for her to forget something like that. She was so happy that she had forgotten about her goal, and his heart skips a beat. The next day, she wanted to talk to Hajime, but got swarmed by everyone in the classroom again. Whenever they force themselves around her, it seems as if Hajime distances himself from her. She rushed over to their little hideout to see if he was still waiting there. Kuro asked him for his contact information, and given the fact he's never been asked that before because he's an unloved, sweaty Valorant player, this gave him a shock. She explains that he couldn't confidently approach her earlier. She asks if he'd want to use a messaging app. He says he'd love to, and they gave each other their contact information, and she sends him a whole paragraph. He sat there for a while reading it, and she said that she ended up finishing the entire chapter. She was really happy about finally asking him, and they talk about the manga he's been yapping about for hours on end. Being consumed by their phones, they texted until they had to go. The next day, after school again, there was a spider on the chair, so she started panicking. And of course, he remembers this from the manga. He starts crying and asks if she's okay. She said they should take it easy today since mid-term exams are coming up. The panic started to settle in. He needs to score at least 80 points in the exam, so he can't keep hanging out like this for a while. Hajime only got into this school because of pure luck. He's not confident that he'll pass the test, but he still wants to talk to Kuro, so he's going to make the effort to do some extra work. He looked very confident in front of her, but knew damn well he wasn't going to do well on that test. He attempted to study, but couldn't do anything. He wonders if Kuro has already started reading the latest chapter of Love Mav by now. He thinks that she gets high scores with ease. He worked hard until 5, and now has some serious eye bags. He thinks that everyone is way more competent than he is. Kuro has bags under her eyes too. He wasn't expecting anyone to look as tired as he did. She asks him for his time after school. She spent her night writing summary notes from chapter 5 of the manga. She attempted to imitate what Aoi wrote in each subject. They'll both do well in their tests. And then she realizes she imitated Aoi without even thinking about it. Hajime was really happy with her making all these notes, but he's worried about how much sleep she got last night. She slept only for 30 minutes. Only a crazy person would do that. But of course, over dramatic Hajime grabs her and starts giving the whole yappuccino about how wrong this is. He realizes he's probably going to be added to the sex offenders list, so lets her go. He apologizes to her. He was just really surprised that someone was worried about him. Meanwhile, she was blushing the entire time. He starts to see that she works really hard to score high in tests, so he vows to work hard on his test too. She lets her intrusive thoughts win and skipped all the way home.